So this study here, we looked at linking numerical scores from satisfaction surveys with sentiment analysis and how that can impact and give pointers to teaching enhancements. So student evaluations of teaching and subjects are often used at educational institutions to get feedback. So often, a lot of the time, an overall satisfaction on a Likert scale between 1 and 5 is given for a particular unit or course overall. That might be given as an example 1 to 5, and then a free comment section at the end is given as well. So what do you think about this unit, or how would you improve it? Those numerical scores are obviously the indicator of student satisfaction and a really important metric of measuring how a unit or course has performed. Motivation as well for this study is obviously fulfilling expectations of students initially. So feedback from those evaluations form allows that to be done and allows units or courses to be improved. And from those free text comments that are added, information can be determined and influence that teaching style that's being used and allows for improvements. Another term that I just mentioned as well was sentiment analysis. So it looks at categorizing a response as either good or bad, or a scale in between. So that was in the title. So we're going to look that matches up with that 5-point Likert scale. So as an example, good or bad or in between. So thumbs up could be good, neutral, or a thumbs down bad would be a 3 scale representation of sentiment analysis. The research questions in this study looked at what is the correlation between the numerical scores and students' comments. So obviously they give that 1 to 5 satisfaction rating, but is there actually a correlation between the number that they give and what they write in that free text box? So we wanted to find that initially. And then after finding that, looking at what teaching activities might influence the selection of numerical scores and how can we use those to give pointers for teaching enhancement. The data set we looked at satisfaction surveys and scores run in the middle and towards the end of semester at QUT. We looked at data over 3 years, over 20 engineering subjects, and over 2,000 text responses were analysed. So some example responses that we might see initially here. So a satisfaction rating, someone who gave a unit of 5 said great structured unit, very well organised, and it was a great learning environment. As another response here, we see down next a satisfaction rating of 2, said the assessment and lectures didn't relate well and it was very confusing. So for those responses anyway, you can see that there is some sort of correlation between the satisfaction rating given and the free text comment. In this study, we looked at machine learning techniques. So machine learning allows a mathematical model to be created and used for prediction. So given particular inputs into this model, an output will be predicted. And we train this model to perform predictions based on that large set of data. And we explored several different types of models to see which one actually performed best. So we had a few parts. Initially, we looked at a process called data processing. So we followed a few standard procedures. So text was converted to lowercase. We had access to a list of 8,000 positive or negative words, which we used to determine the sentiment for the text. Any words that didn't appear in that positive or negative list were removed. And we looked at that as an external dictionary. We then created mathematical models. Those models were trained based on 80% of the text responses that we had access to, and we tested on the remaining 20% of the responses. So we were able to build up a good model with a large amount of data, but then use 20% to test the validity of that model. The results that we got were then rounded to a 3-point Likert scale, so good, bad, or neutral, rather than the 1 to 5 just to determine whether we were on the right track. This is some of the results that we got. So we see here training data size versus percentage correctly classified. We looked at 3 techniques here: linear, naive Bayes, and SVM, which stands for support vector machine. We see that as the training data size actually increases, the reliability of all of the models improves, but SVM, which is the purple and green ones there, are the ones that are on top with the most accuracy. Looking at the results in more detail, so the testing data is what's most important to check the validity of a machine learning model. And we see here the highest one was our SVM once again, which had accuracy of 57.7%. So what this tells us is that 57% of the text responses that we used, we were able to correctly predict whether it was a good, neutral, or bad review. So we were able to 57% of the time predict the sentiment of that review. And that's really important because it tells us that there is correlation. Random chance would just imply that you'd get 33%, but we got 57%. But the reason why it's not a lot higher is, number one, because we didn't have lots and lots of data, so we're looking at in the future using more data. But number two, obviously you're not going to get a 100% match because sometimes the comments written completely have no relation to that satisfaction score given. So it tells us that there definitely is some correlation, but not perfect correlation. So in summary, as I said, there was a correlation between those numerical scores, and we were able to get actions addressing problem areas and we used that SVM machine learning model, which was able to predict 57% of the text responses. So what does that mean in terms of teaching? Well, we looked at as well at a few different keywords on the left-hand side here. So words such as tutorials, tutor, assignments, lecture, etc. And we pulled out the amount of times that those words, so if we take, for example, the top line here, this line here tells us that 31% of units that were given a low score, 31% of responses, that gave a unit a low score mentioned the word tutorial. 34% of them, 34% of the medium responses mentioned the word tutorial, gave it a medium score, and 27% of responses that had a high score mentioned the word tutorial. So this allowed us to pick a few key points here. So for example, if we look at the keyword lecture was mentioned a very high percentage of time in both low, medium, and high scores. So this definitely indicates to us that lecture plays a key role in the satisfaction of students, which of course makes sense. And if we look as well at the keyword content, so content we see 30% and 29% roughly for the low and medium, which are fairly similar, but then it jumps down to 18% of the high scores. So units that are mentioning the keyword content a lot of the time might mean that not necessarily the content of the unit needs to be looked at, but how the content all ties cohesively together between those lectures and tutorials, etc. So in conclusion, the correlation shown between satisfaction and comment, so that was that 57% predicted right, that was shown. We then could draw recommendations from that insight to particular teaching activities that might be important to look at. The ones this was for the results for 20 units overall, not just one particular unit. It might be beneficial in the future to look at on a unit by unit basis, so teaching insights for that particular unit rather than a lot of units as a whole. We'd also like to look at using larger data sets in the future to improve the accuracy of the prediction, and taking into account negation in the model. So words such as not or didn't can impact the meaning of a sentence a lot. So we'd like to see how that can be tackled in the future to improve the accuracy of the model as well. Thank you.